Hello, this is Miss Havisham. Here I am at Hathersage Church in the Peak District. Now, as you can see, there's the gargoyles round the top of the tower again. I'll come back to those later. What I'm going to do is go and look at Little John's grave. Little John, who was the lieutenant of Robin Hood, who used to rob the rich to give to the poor. And Little John was born in Hathersage, apparently. This is his grave, so see how long the grave is. His real name apparently was John Little. So he would have lived at the time in about the 1200s when it was King John was the king on the throne at the time. I'm not sure about the timeline though, because that time was when I think that there's been some discrepancies, and I don't think that was the real time when that what happened. Basically, it's a really old gravestone, the big ones. Well, it says 1828, so it's not the oldest I've seen, but it's a big family stone. Now this place has got a lot of interesting things surrounding it, because Charlotte Bronte actually came to Hathersage in 1845. She came here to stay at the vicarage with her friend Ellen Nussey, her lifelong friend Ellen Nussey, who she met at school when she was about 13. And Ellen Nussey's brother, Henry Nussey, actually did propose marriage to Charlotte Bronte, but she turned him down. When he eventually became rector of Hathersage Church, then Charlotte Bronte and Ellen Nussey came to stay for 3 weeks in 1845, and this is where she got the inspiration for Jane Eyre. So she chose the name Eyre due to a family in the area, a wealthy family called Eyre, and she found that name on one of the gravestones, and this gave her the inspiration to call the heroine of the novel Jane Eyre. So Charlotte Bronte was actually here. Now you can see the landscape that would have inspired her to write that book. Those awful gargoyles. Really awful. Nothing godly about them. I said that before. So I'm just going to keep walking around, and I've been here before, but a long time ago. Regarding the Brontes, they actually wrote under pen names when they first had the first published book of poems written that was published, and they went under pen names of Charlotte Bronte was called Currer Bell, Emily Bronte was called Ellis Bell, and Anne Bronte was called Acton Bell. Now, I wondered about these pseudonyms that they used, why they would have chosen that. And now I really do believe that they chose the name Bell as that represents ball. I really do think that, because I don't see where that came from to cut the name Bell. And also the name Ellis was a combination of L and IS, which is Saturn and Isis. Currer Bell for Charlotte, I would think that would be a play on the word of curate. And I also then think Acton Bell for Anne would have been a play on the word of actor, because they were really acting out roles. Look at that one. Wow, So lots of strange stories surrounding the Brontes. Let me see. It's a really nice day today. Once again, I've got to be careful where I walk because the ground is uneven again. That was a bird, actually. Don't see birds in churchyards very often. That was a pigeon. Not very often you do see them. I can get some of this strange architecture into the picture. These awful faces. Now, this church was supposed to be originated from Norman times. But then again, I don't agree with the timeline. I think the Norman times was much closer than what we're told. So I don't think that the Norman times was as far back as what we are told. I think that really the Romans were made up. And I think, this is my theory, I think that the Normans were the Romans, basically, because of these Norman churches. They were supposedly built by the Normans. Now, the Eyre family, who Charlotte Bronte decided to name Jane Eyre after, the Eyre family, they came over with William the Conqueror from France. And so that's why they were then rewarded with large tracts of land in this area in the Peak District. This was a reward by William the Conqueror for the loyalty of, I think he was called either William or Robert Eyre, I can't remember, I think it was Robert Eyre. So they were given a large area of land in this area as a reward, and then the daughters of the families then married, the Eyre families then married into other wealthy families, and this gave them all really large houses and large tracts of land. And they would then communicate with each house, apparently. They got a special method of contacting each home, these large homes that they had, by a secret method of communication. Now, I would imagine that this was using some form of telegraph or wireless communication. So they did have that, without a question of a doubt. And I think that's what they were using to have messages from the different homes in the area to this Eyre family and all the different branches of the family. So this is definitely how they were communicating, using telegraph and wireless. See these things that stick up on all churches, they all have these, and this is what we're thinking now, that they were containing some form of communication equipment. And as Mick pointed out, my colleague Rebel Without a Cause, that they could have been spray rendered with sandstone to cover up that antennae, you know, so that it's then out of use, basically, when they want to stop that being used later on, or hide the fact that it was used at all. these are the flat graves that were put in the ground. If it was a flat grave, then they wouldn't have been as well off as the ones who had an upstanding gravestone memorial. That one's 1810. Hoping I'm capturing this. The sun's so bright in my eyes. Hope I can capture it as well as possible. And to see, this is the landscape that Charlotte Bronte would have looked out onto. She stayed in the vicarage, which I think was probably that one over there. Of course, her stories were mainly autobiographical. She did actually base them on her own life experiences, and then she would build them in with people that she knew as well. So they were all really drawn from real life, so you can get a lot of real history from them. This is interesting. My flesh shall slumber in the ground till the last trumpet's joyful sound. Then burst its chains with sweet surprise, and in my Saviour's image rise. Now these places, they weren't actually Christian. When these places were built, as so-called places of worship, they weren't Christian, because this country wasn't Christian until the 1700s, and then Christianity was brought in as a way of controlling the masses. So I think this is an older part over here, so I'm going back up this way. So, I mean, obviously this place was actually, you know, the rebuilding work was done in the 1800s anyway. But the so-called place of worship, it's supposed to be going back to Norman times, it wasn't Christian then. I mean, that was the time of the Crusades. But again, you know, look, these thick walls with these buttresses going upwards, why would that be needed as a place of worship? You know, it's just, it doesn't make sense, and it doesn't make sense. Now that face, it's not pleasant, is it? Basically, they were to scare demons away. Well, they were demons. They weren't scaring they're supposed to be scaring the demons away, but they weren't actually. Everything's in reverse. They were the demons. They were the demons. So they were going to attract the demons in, if anything. I don't really know where I'm going round here. I'm just going around randomly. I think that would have been the vicarage. That would have been the vicarage next door where Charlotte Bronte stayed. She was 29 when she came here. It would have been interesting to go back in a time tunnel and go back to that time. See what it would be really like. I think she captured it in her books really well. I'm going to go into the church because it is open. So I'm going to go around into the church next. The usual holly. Holly for the holy days, holidays. All pagan. This country was pagan until the 1700s. All the feast days were pagan. So any talk of Christianity is just a smokescreen, because it wasn't the case. I know people like to look at the old architecture, especially people who are probably in America. I know people like to see these. Some old stones that propped up against the wall. Sacred to the memory, only as long as there's anyone left to remember. That's what I always say. Those faces at the side again. That could have been, it's an old king and queen there. I think that we often see Queen Matilda depicted. Could that have been King John? So I think the timeline's totally out, so I'm going to have to look into that more. And I need to do more research on that. I'm really interested in the false timelines. Oh, that one's an older one. 1792. They just used to go straight across the line, all the way across, until they came to the end, and then they start a new line again. And the bottom one is 1824. That one is 1792, and it's obviously a J. I'm going to go over to the church. Look, this really old. I'm walking over someone's grave here. Lots of them are so faded with all the stuff growing over them. Well, that's a good thing in a way. From some people's point of view, it means that it obscures the truth. And this, not sure what this is. What that is. This one. 1769. J. Trying to get that in. 1769. Age 71 years. 1778, 82 years. 1788, 56 years. These are the ages people die now anyway. Yes, some younger people, grandchildren. But yeah, young people died, but young people die now. So there were less people, or so we're told. But was something else I was going to talk about was the Estuary KV Act, which came about in 1666. And this was when everyone was depicted as dead at sea. I'm going to the church now. Everyone was depicted as lost at sea. Now, of course, this was the time after the Black Death plague, and lots of people, of course, who disappeared or died left behind property. Obviously, that wasn't many paupers or the poor poorer classes, they didn't leave anything really, but the other people who died, because obviously people died across the board, wealthy people died, and they had property. So, in an effort to be able to distribute this property again, the people who died or disappeared were deemed to be lost at sea. So this act was brought in 1666. Now, I believe that the Black Death was so named not just because it was the plague, the bubonic plague, although this could have arisen from all the rats and everything devouring the bodies and lots of plagues of rats everywhere. But it was also the Black Death was, I think it was because of the mud event, the catastrophe that would have inundated everywhere with the black mud and soil. And I think this was why it was called the Black Death. This is the link that I'm making now, that it was called the Black Death because of the inundation of mud and soil. I prefer to call it inundation rather than the mud flood, which does conjure up the wrong picture. Let's look at the face up there to pick some things out. So that's when this act was brought in, and that means that now the act is still in force, and it means that we're all classed as lost at sea. That is why when anyone dies or anyone disappears and no one knows where they've gone, then after 7 years they can be assumed to be dead. And this is because of this act. It's so that they can carry on redistribute the property and to do with insurance policies and such like. But of course, back then, there would have been all the property and buildings and land that was left behind by these people who had perished in the inundation or the Black Death, plague, whatever. And that was enabled them to, for example, the landowners who've been leasing out the land to people, they would end up being able to lease it out again after 7 years, once these people had been deemed to be dead. That was the purpose of the act. So that was the Kesqui KV Act of 1666. Very interesting. It looks a lot more modern inside in some ways, I think, because they put the new carpet down. Usual angels up there. Angels are basically fallen angels. There's nothing Christian about angels, nothing. The fallen angels, or they're the actual entities with wings that came up from the underworld. From my researchers, that's where they're from. The beings with wings came up from the underworld. There's nothing to do with Christianity at all. And so the Christianity has just been basically brought in to deceive the masses and force them into subjugation. So, it seems to look too clinical. Very strange. Oh, there's a pipe organ there. Some kind of winged being. think they're more like the devil. The winged beings are more like devils. That's my opinion. That's a depiction of St. Michael with the dragon. This is St. Michael's Church, actually. This church is called St. Michael's Church. I've seen more quainter churches inside than this. Considering how old it's supposed to be, I'm not. I think it's just been modernised inside. And I know they found some paintings on the walls, but I can't see them now. There were some paintings on the walls that were discovered years ago, and I can't see them now. Don't know where they've gone. I'm going back outside. It's not as interesting inside as I expected it to be, although I've been before, but it was a long time ago. I'm going back outside. She is not lost. Her spirit giveth immortal peace, and high it liveth. She is not mute, with angels blending. Her voice is still to us descending. For to me, to live is Christian, and to die is gain. How weird. How weird is that? It's to make you think that, don't worry, if things are not too great down here, then things are going to get better when you get up there. But where is the up there? There isn't anything up there. There isn't anything up there. So all we can hope for is to come back in another life and try again. Well, thank you for watching, everyone, and I'll say bye for now. And bye from Hathersage Church in the Peak District.